Today, thought we could do kind of a guided inquiry at the beginning about being with others in the small group. I'm just going to pose a series of questions. I'm just really interested in hearing from each other about your experiences. Let's start with, how are you feeling about coming into this Sunday, knowing that our topic, the way we are together in small groups? And as we kind of just reflect on that, we're here. Many of you are so familiar to me, of course, and to each other as well. Just to check in with, okay, I know what we're doing here. Just to start, maybe just a general reflection on, I love going into the small groups. I don't ever go into the small groups. Sometimes, like, what's your experience with this specific small group? So our community here and the way we divide into small groups or gather in small sharing circles. What's your experience with that? And as you're noticing your experience, notice also, how do you feel in your body? What is your brain telling you about that? But also, what's your body telling you? What's your body signaling you? Let's give that a minute or two. Just this specific community. What's my experience in the small groups? And one of the things that might come up is times where you felt really connected and really loved and really witnessed in this community, in the small groups. And more likely, it will be times also of, or maybe instead of, times when you felt like someone was kind of dysregulated or someone commented how you felt then. So just to keep noticing, what's your experience in this community in small groups? And just to keep regulated, keep noticing your body. Did you tighten up a little bit? Did you brace your shoulders? Did you hold your breath a bit? Sometimes it's fairly obvious, sometimes it's a little bit more subtle. And then, most likely as well, other experiences will come in, other groups. It takes courage, for sure, to share vulnerably. So, if you were to kind of sense into, what is that reluctance about? So, it's getting towards the end of, normally it would be slides. So, the time is approaching, and that last minute or two when you're making a decision about going in, what is it that affects your decision? And what is it in your body, in your breath, in your thoughts, in your mind? What do you expect? What is your mind kind of projecting into the future? This is what my experience is going to be, and I want that. I don't want that. I need to be careful about. So let's sit with that for a few minutes. What are some of the factors that kind of come in, either kind of obvious ones, like a memory of somebody? Well, I was sharing that time, and then that person said this, and this is how I felt. It might be something like that, or it might be something more subtle, just a feeling. Or it might be that felt sense of, yes, I'm in this group. I love this opportunity to share and to be here with people. Notice your nervous system regulation. Notice what's coming and going. Felt seen and heard, held. And as you're sitting with that, notice your window of tolerance right now, today, and just kind of generally as you're coming into these groups. So, to narrow the focus again to this particular community and the particular focus that we have on somatic awareness and speaking from our own experience, witnessing each other. And today, this is a little bit different because we're not working with a topic or slides specifically. If we think about, okay, we were doing that 20 minutes on boundaries. So when I was thinking about going into the small group, I really wanted to share what my experience was there. Or, we're talking about core deficiency beliefs and it feels a bit too much right now for me to share that. Or let your mind go back to some of the topics, perhaps. When we're looking at window of tolerance and resilience, we're really looking at something very specific to the moment. And we can also practice. We can practice this. So when we have that thought about, I expect that I'll be judged, or that someone's going to look at me with, it might be pretty benign, or it might be really obvious. Like they might say something like, well, when I was in that situation, I did this. So sometimes people will get into that kind of crosstalk. What does it mean to me as I'm kind of looking at or exploring my window of tolerance? So, with this particular topic of what it's like for us in small groups, it might be easier for us to go into this exploring because it's not quite as in our heart, or perhaps it might not be quite as vulnerable. Just continue to notice what's happening now in your body. Come back into just noticing the breath, looking around, regulating. Maybe bring to mind a time now when you took a risk and you were feeling pretty scared. Maybe the people that came into the small group with you, you've had some experience with them and you kind of feel like, I think this will be okay. And you took that risk and you shared. Oftentimes we have that trepidation in our body when we're thinking about that and remembering that. Notice if anything like that has happened with you and what's coming in. This is really just activating, remembering, and then noticing what's the response that my body's having to this, as well as what are the thoughts in my mind. So, whether we've been judged and traumatized in a group, or whether we've been judged and traumatized by judgment from individuals, that is our experience. For most of us, I'm sure everybody has had experience of, I took a risk and shared something and they judged me, or whatever it was that they were doing, I felt excluded. Let's come back into our own discernment of who I am. So that's an unpleasant experience. So in the past, it's been traumatizing. Today, is that the same? Do we have more resilience or strength? Like, what's your experience over 6 months or 6 years? Or for some of us who are older, I've been traumatized by groups in the 1980s. So it might go back a long ways. So, what have you learned, or how have you developed resilience by being in groups? Whether that's a group of one with a friend or whether it's in a group like this. What's your tolerance now, or does it hit you as hard kind of if you have an experience like that? It might be somebody's just not very regulated and they take up all the time, or it might be somebody jumps into your lane and gives you advice. Is your experience the same now, then? And specifically, do you go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? So if you think about the groups now in the last today, but also the last several months, and when the conditions are not perfect. So sometimes we just have that beautiful experience of everybody's in sync. We really feel heard. Our bodies are relaxed. So also hear about the benevolence, assuming the benevolence of people. And then sometimes we can get kind of blindsided by that. I'll forget that I need to be vigilant around that person. I forgot it. That's not safe for me to share that here. So we all have experiences like that as well. So this is a nervous system exploration as much as anything. So here, appreciating the talking, the regulating moments before the talking, whether that's we breathe, we put our hands on our heart. And then what happens when we're in the situation and things are wonderful and we kind of just get into it? But then what happens when things are not so wonderful? So somebody else in the group, or maybe it's us, are not regulated. We're antsy and we're very low tolerance. We're expecting a lot of ourselves in this group when we go into the small sharing circles. The way the somatic inquiries work, the way I do these classes, is I deliberately stir things up during the 20 or 25 minutes of the slides. And we do it in with as much regulation as we can. We're checking in with our body. We're checking in with the energy. But that's what I'm doing really is I'm putting in these prompts of things of something to look at. And then we get into the sharing circle. And so we're all a little stirred up. We might be in different forms of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. The urge to fawn and overshare, forcing attunement to try to control the social interaction. So that's a really interesting thing is how do I feel safe? And how much of what I'm doing in the small group is to try to feel safe. It's probably quite a lot if we're dysregulated, and probably not at all if we're really regulated. So just to take that deep breath and notice that we're supported in our chair. And then feel into kindness for a moment and compassion. It's a little bit easier for us to feel compassion for others if we're pretty regulated ourselves. We've been able to share and be heard and witnessed, and we've come back into maybe a feeling of vulnerability, but feeling of connection. And then other times we might be feeling like, whoa, I said too much, or we might be irritated with ourselves that we got dysregulated. There's so many different patterns that come in from the past. So just as we're getting into our own heart, could we offer ourselves some compassion and also some admiration for our courage? There's a lot of room to not have to do this perfectly. And notice if that's accessible to you right now. What's your first initial gut sense? Yeah, this has been kind of interesting. I'd like to share that. I hope this person is in my group. I hope that person's not. Whatever it is that comes up. See if you could allow yourself to have the experience you're having. Yeah, and there's a lot here too about I don't want to break the rules. I don't want to say something insensitive. We don't want that to happen to us, but we also don't want to activate someone else's nervous system. There's a lot of components of this. The idea is that we let ourselves be seen and witnessed. We do that from a place of being as grounded as we can. And as you're in the groups, you monitor as you go along what is your experience, not to share too much that might activate somebody else. We want to keep it general enough that people get an idea, but we don't share traumatic details. So that's one. Another is that we really try to stay centered in our own body as we're sharing and as we're witnessing. The reason that we do that, one of the reasons is that we learn what our own response is to other people. So as we're going in and someone's saying, well, this and this and this, there might be some shadows come up. It might be, well, I hate it when my friend does that to me. And now here's this person here doing that, or whatever that might be. So we could notice instead of doing something active about it. So instead of breaking in and going, I hate it when you do that. In this group, we're just kind of sitting with that. So what does that feel like? Can I come back into regulation? And that we don't give advice. A couple of kind of practical things. One is as you begin your share, it's often helpful to take 3 or 4 breaths. And then just to remember not to comment on people's shares, because part of what makes the sharing safe is that we feel like we can just express ourselves and we're not going to be commented on. We're not going to be encouraged. It's not like a friendship where we might, whatever we might say to a friend. So this is just a place where we can speak and be